I fell in love with wrestling SummerSlam 1992, so I was on the tailwind of the WWF UK explosion. The first show I ever saw was SummerSlam 92. The match that hooked me is still my favourite match of all time, Bret Hart versus Davey Boy Smith. Obviously, the official for that match is Joey Marella, Gino's son. Joey passes away tragically. I believe it was a couple of years later. What can you tell me about Joey and obviously how his passing affected Gino? Because I remember, I think that's probably the first wrestling death I remember as a boy learning of his passing.
Yeah, so Joey had been kind of the senior referee before Earl Hebner came in. Earl Hebner came in '88, and Joey had been refereeing since I think '83. And even after Earl got there, Joey would get a lot of big matches. Like you said, he got the main event at SummerSlam. He got the main event at WrestleMania III. He was very well respected. And Gino had never wanted him to be in the business. He wanted him to go to college. He thought he had a lot of potential as a baseball player, but Joey wanted to be in the business, and so Gorilla relented. And so I think when Joey, unfortunately, he succumbed to a lot of the problems of the business. He did have addiction issues. He was in rehab. This had, from life on the road. This had nothing to do with his passing, though. That's important to know. And it gave some consolation to the family that he wasn't consumed by that stuff. The problem was, in those days, the company was not doing so well in '94. They were not really that profitable, if at all. And so they were cutting a lot of corners. One of the corners they cut was you had to fly home from the same airport that you flew in from, because that would save money rather than booking you in two different airports. So, but that was a problem because they would do like 17-day runs where you wouldn't go home. You would just go to one show after another, after another, after another, and then go home for like 3 or 4 days and then go back out. So they flew into Newark Airport, and then they did a whole bunch of shows up and down the East Coast. Now, the last show that they did was in Maryland, which is very far away from Newark. It's like hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And so, and on top of that, their flight was first thing in the morning. So that meant you had to drive through the night after doing all that. So guys would pair up. But in this case, even that didn't help. Joey was riding with Bruno Lauer, who was Harvey Whippleman, because they were both flying out of Newark. So they thought, well, let's ride together. And then they both fell asleep. Both men fell asleep at the same time. And they wound up flying off the highway on the New Jersey Turnpike, going into the median, hitting a tree. And the tree was on the driver's side, and it killed Joey instantly. And Gorilla was never the same after that. You talk to anybody that knew him, that was it. He was done at that point. He lost all of his passion and enthusiasm for wrestling and for life. He hung on for 5 more years. He still worked nonstop, and he was able to turn it on when he needed to on TV, but he was no longer that guy away from the camera. He was kind of a lost soul. Part of that was, a lot of people may know that Joey was adopted, as well as Joey's sister Sharon. They were adopted by Gino because they were his wife Maureen's children from a previous marriage. Maureen's first husband had abandoned the family when Maureen was pregnant with Joey. Pretty crazy stuff. And so Joey never even knew his father, and I don't even think Sharon remembered him. And when Gino came into their life, when Joey was a baby, he met Maureen. Maureen was friends with a woman who was babysitting Bobo Brazil's children, of all things, if you could imagine. And she lived in Hell's Kitchen, which is a section of Manhattan, which is in the same neighborhood as where the Holland Hotel was, which was in those days the corporate headquarters of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in Manhattan, not in Connecticut. And so she got to meet Gino that way. She would come around and see him and go to the Holland Hotel and see some of the wrestlers there. So when Gino came into their life, they met in late '63. They wound up marrying in '66 when they were out in California. And after they got married, they also had their own child together, which was Valerie, their youngest. And then Gino adopted the first 2 kids, which means, he was not a stepfather. I want to say that clearly. He was legally their father. He was their adopted father. He was not just a stepfather. And he loved them like they were his own biological children. And I think there was a little guilt there too, that he had let him in the business, that in a way Joey had been pulled into this business because of him coming into his life as a child. And I think all that was wrapped into it, and it just ruined him.
Yeah, I mean, it's as fathers, it's just the kind of thing I can't wrap my head around what that would do to you. And I'm sure there's a lot of guilt, and obviously I can understand also the feeling of losing love for the business, because obviously so much of the way the business was run and the scheduling fed into that exhaustion that led to that untimely death. So yeah, really tragic.
There was some anger at the time from the family, actually, because they were thinking about that. Like, you know, there were so many airports that they passed on the way. You know, there was an airport going out of in Maryland down there. There was the airport in Philadelphia. There were, there were a lot of possible places they could have flown them out of, and there was some bitterness at first, and then they, kind of absorbed it. Gorilla kind of had this attitude of just, this is the business, this is our business, and you're either in it or you're not. It didn't mean he was happy about it, though.
No, and I think to kind of go full circle with what we were talking about at the beginning, again, not to lay everything on Becky Lynch and that comment in the book, but there is a point there that that the generation that we are in today with wrestlers, I'm not just saying WWE, but professional wrestling generally, and what professional wrestling is worth now, and the money that the talents are making. So much of that is built obviously on the sacrifices of the generations that come before. And I think it's just so important to have, conversations like this, people like yourself, Brian, putting out books like you've put out, to keep remembering the stars of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s that genuinely laid the foundation for everything we see now in this Netflix era of wrestling.
Oh, without a doubt. And I was very excited to see that when WWE changed their opening montage for when they debuted on ESPN, that Gorilla's on the very first screen. I don't know if you guys noticed. Mm-hmm. And he had been absent from that montage for many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say, I don't know if it's a coincidence that happens in the month that my book came out. I don't know if I'm giving myself too much credit, but I'm hoping that I'm helping to raise the awareness and remind people of how important he was. He was so integral in so many ways to that company. He was like, their most important day-to-day person, really. I mean, in terms of like making everything run, he was even involved in booking. And so you can't let people forget things like that. It's so easy to forget, especially from the eras where there's not as much footage recorded as there is, let's say in the last 40 years. And on top of that, a lot of the stuff he did was behind the scenes. So unless people talk about it, there's no way to know it, and there's no way to remember it. So it's important to talk to the people who are still with us while you can. You have to keep these things alive. Otherwise, everything and anything will be forgotten eventually.